Saul and David. Tonight, let your heart settle into a place of peace as we return to the old stories, to a time when the hills of Israel held secrets of kings and shepherds, prophets and warriors. Before this moment in the story, Saul had already begun to drift from the calling God had given him. His impatience, his fear, and his disobedience had created a painful distance between him and the Lord. And now God was preparing someone new, someone unexpected, to carry the light forward. And this is where we quietly step back into the unfolding of sacred history. The Lord spoke to Samuel, his prophet, with a firmness that carried gentle compassion. "How long will you mourn for Saul? Fill your horn with oil and go. I have chosen one of Jesse's sons to be king." Samuel bowed his head. He had loved Saul, guided him, warned him, prayed for him, and losing him in this way felt like losing a son. But he also knew that when the Lord opened a new chapter, the old one could not be clung to. Still, he whispered anxiously, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." The Lord answered, "Take a young heifer with you and say, 'You have come to sacrifice to me.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do." So Samuel set out toward Bethlehem. The road wound through golden hills and quiet valleys, and the late-day sunlight stretched long shadows across the earth. The old prophet walked slowly, leaning on his staff, feeling the weight of both grief and hope resting on his shoulders. When he reached Bethlehem, the town's elders approached him trembling, as if sensing the heaviness of his mission. "Do you come in peace?" they asked. "In peace," Samuel said, lifting a calming hand. "I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and join me." He also sent word to Jesse of Bethlehem, a man known for his character and for the strength of his sons. When the sacrifice had been made and the sacred meal prepared, the sons of Jesse gathered before Samuel. Jesse presented them one by one, starting with Eliab, the eldest, tall, strong, handsome, a young man who looked every bit like a future king. Samuel felt a stirring in his heart. "Surely this is the Lord's anointed," he thought. But the Lord's voice whispered within him, steady and clear, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. I do not look at the things people look at. They look at outward appearance, but I look at the heart." So Eliab stepped aside. Then Abinadab came before Samuel, then Shammah, then the others, 7 sons in total. And each time the Lord said, "Not this one." Confused, Samuel turned to Jesse. "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse hesitated a moment before answering. "There is still the youngest, David. He is out tending the sheep." There was no disrespect in Jesse's voice, only the practical assumption that the prophet surely wouldn't want the youngest, the quiet one who spent his days with the sheep and the sky. But Samuel nodded gently. "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." A messenger ran to the fields where David tended the flock. David was a youth, perhaps just stepping into early manhood, with bright eyes, a humble posture, and the warm scent of grass and open air on his clothes. His hair was wind-touched, his hands calloused from the shepherd's staff. The moment he entered the room, Samuel felt something shift within him, like the gentle rising of dawn. And the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, he is the one." Samuel stood. The room fell silent. He took the horn of oil and poured it over David's head. The oil shimmered as it ran down his hair and forehead, glistening on his face. And in that sacred moment, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon David with quiet strength, not the strength of kingship yet, but the strength of destiny, touching a willing heart. David closed his eyes as warmth filled his chest. Samuel stepped back, knowing his mission was complete. And without fanfare, he returned to Ramah, leaving the future of Israel resting in the hands of a shepherd boy. Meanwhile, Saul's spirit grew troubled. The presence of the Lord, once his comfort, no longer rested upon him. In its place came a heaviness, dark, restless, tormenting, a shadow that pressed upon his thoughts and stole his peace. His attendants noticed his suffering. One of them said gently, "My lord, an evil spirit is tormenting you. Allow us to find someone who plays the lyre. When he plays, perhaps the music will ease your spirit." Saul nodded slowly. "Find someone who plays well. Bring him to me." Another servant said, "I have seen a son of Jesse in Bethlehem. He plays skillfully. He is brave, speaks well, and the Lord is with him." So Saul sent messengers to Jesse. "Send me your son David." Jesse prepared gifts, bread, wine, and a young goat, and sent David to the king. When David entered the hall, Saul studied him curiously. "You are Jesse's son?" "I am," David replied. "Play for me," Saul said. David lifted the lyre. His fingers brushed the strings, and a soft, flowing melody filled the room, warm, calming, gentle as a stream beneath moonlight. Slowly, Saul's spirit eased. The heaviness loosened its grip, and from that moment, David found favor in Saul's eyes. Saul asked him to remain in his service, and David agreed. He did not yet know how deeply this decision would shape his life. In service, in conflict, in friendship, and in sorrow. But for now, he played, and his music brought peace. Some time passed, and David continued serving Saul whenever the king's troubled spirit grew heavy. Yet between these moments in the palace, David returned home, tending his father's sheep with the same quiet faithfulness he carried everywhere he went. But while the hills of Bethlehem remained peaceful, the world beyond them was shifting. A storm was forming, one that would shape the destiny of Israel. The Philistines, long-standing enemies of the people, gathered their armies once more. They spread out across the ridges of the valley of Elah, their banners fluttering in the wind like dark warnings. Saul and the Israelite army marched out to meet them, setting up camp across from the Philistines. The valley lay between them, a wide, open arena where courage would soon be tested. Every morning and every evening, a single voice echoed across the valley floor. Goliath of Gath stepped out, a giant of a man, towering over all others. His armor gleamed under the sun, heavy and intimidating. His spear alone looked more like a tree trunk than a weapon. He called out with a voice like thunder, "Why do you come to line up for battle? Choose a man to fight me. If he kills me, we will be your servants. But if I kill him, you will serve us." Day after day he shouted. Day after day Israel trembled. Even Saul, once bold and courageous, felt his spirit faint. Jesse, concerned for his 3 oldest sons who served in the army, called to David, "Take this roasted grain and these loaves to your brothers, and take these cheeses to their commander. Bring back word of how they are." So David rose early the next morning. He entrusted the sheep to another shepherd and set out on the road to the battlefield, carrying food, provisions, and his quiet, steady heart. When he reached the camp, he left the supplies with the keeper and hurried to the front lines. As he arrived, the army was forming ranks, ready to face another morning of Goliath's taunts. And right on cue, the giant stepped forward again. David stood still, listening, not with fear, but with disbelief. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine," he asked the men around him, "that he should defy the armies of the living God?" His oldest brother Eliab overheard him. Frustration flashed in his eyes. "Why have you come down here?" Eliab snapped. "And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride. You only came to watch the battle." David blinked, stung by the harshness. "What have I done now? I only asked a question." He moved away, asking others, and everyone repeated the same, that the king had promised reward and honor to the man who defeated the giant. And David, the young shepherd who feared no one, even told the men around him that he was willing to face the giant himself. Word reached Saul. The king immediately sent for him. When David entered the tent, still dusty from travel, Saul looked at him with concern. "You cannot go against this Philistine to fight him," Saul said gently. "You are only a boy. He has been a warrior since his youth." But David stood firm, his voice calm and sincere. "My lord, I have been keeping my father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the lamb from its mouth, and when it turned on me, I seized it and killed it." Saul stared at him surprised. "The Lord who delivered me from the lion and the bear will deliver me from this Philistine." Saul saw something in David's eyes, a kind of faith he barely remembered in himself. Perhaps even a longing stirred in him, a longing to believe like that again. "Go," Saul said at last, "and the Lord be with you." He placed his own armor on David, the bronze helmet, the coat of mail. David tried walking in it, but the weight felt unnatural. He shook his head gently, returned the armor, and stepped outside with nothing but his staff, his sling, and the quiet certainty that God would guide him. Near the stream, he chose 5 smooth stones and placed them in his pouch. Then he walked out onto the valley floor. When Goliath saw him approaching, he laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Am I a dog," he roared, "that you come at me with sticks?" David stood his ground. His voice carried across the valley, steady, unwavering. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and all will know that the battle is the Lord's." Goliath moved toward him with thunderous steps. David ran toward the giant. He reached into his pouch, placed a stone in his sling, and let it fly. The stone struck Goliath's forehead with a crack, and the giant fell face down on the ground. Silence for a moment, then a cry rose from the Israelite side, stunned, triumphant, overflowing with joy. David stood over the fallen warrior, breathless, overwhelmed by what God had done. The Philistines fled. Israel pursued them. The battle was won. Soon David was brought before Saul again, still holding the giant's severed head. a symbol of victory as unexpected as it was complete. "Whose son are you?" Saul asked quietly. David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." Saul nodded slowly, a strange mixture of gratitude and unease stirring within him. He did not yet understand why he felt that unease, but something inside him shifted, and the story was beginning to turn. Jonathan, Saul's son, saw David and felt his heart drawn toward him. Scripture says that Jonathan's soul was knit to David. He loved him as his own soul. He gave David his robe, his tunic, even his sword and bow, signs of deep trust and covenant friendship. David continued to succeed in everything he did. The people loved him. The soldiers respected him. Even the servants spoke of him with admiration. But Saul was watching. One day, as the army returned home, the women came out singing and dancing. "Saul has slain his thousands," they sang, "and David his tens of thousands." Saul's face darkened. His heart tightened. Envy, sharp and corrosive, began to take root. "They credit David with tens of thousands," Saul muttered, "but me with only thousands. What more can he gain but the kingdom?" From that day on, Saul kept a very close watch on David, very close. Not long after the songs of celebration faded, the shadows in Saul's heart began to deepen. The spirit that tormented him returned with greater force, restless, heavy, whispering fear and suspicion into his mind. And David's presence, once comforting, now stirred something uneasy in the king's soul. One afternoon, Saul sat in his hall with a spear in his hand. He gripped it tightly without quite recognizing why. David played nearby, as he often did, brushing gentle melodies from his lyre, hoping to soothe the king's troubled spirit. The soft notes floated across the room like a warm breeze. But Saul's thoughts churned. "He is loved more than me. He is admired more than me. He is chosen more than me." His jaw tightened, his fingers clenched around the spear, and then, in a sudden burst of fear and fury, Saul hurled the spear across the room. "I will pin him to the wall," he shouted. David moved just in time. The spear struck the stone behind him, quivering from the force. David froze, breath shallow, heart pounding. Saul said nothing, only stared, as though unsure why he had done it. Slowly, quietly, David slipped out of the room. But days later it happened again. Another outburst, another spear, another narrow escape. After that second attack, David knew the palace was no longer safe. Still, Saul sent David to lead soldiers in battle, perhaps hoping danger would remove the young man he feared. But the opposite happened. David led with wisdom and humility. He succeeded in every mission. His men admired him, the people celebrated him, and the Lord was with him. Saul saw this and grew even more afraid. Then word came that Saul's daughter Michal loved David. For a moment, Saul saw an opportunity. Perhaps, he thought, I can use this to ensnare him. So he offered Michal to David, hoping the marriage would place David in harm's way. But even here, David prospered. The Lord continued to protect him, and everything Saul intended for harm fell apart. Saul's jealousy deepened, growing bitter and sharp. One day, blinded by rage, he spoke openly to his attendants and to his son Jonathan. David must die. Jonathan felt his breath stop. David was like a brother to him, bound by covenant, loyalty, and love. Jonathan could not bear the thought of harm coming to him. He approached his father gently but firmly. "My father," he said, "do not sin against your servant David. He has done nothing wrong. He risked his life to strike down the Philistine, and through him the Lord brought a great victory to all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then would you shed innocent blood by killing David without cause?" Saul listened. A long, tense silence followed. Then he exhaled and said, "As surely as the Lord lives, David shall not be put to death." Jonathan bowed respectfully and hurried to find David. When he reached him, David looked up with caution in his eyes. Jonathan touched his shoulder gently. "It is safe to return," he said. "My father has sworn an oath he will not harm you." David searched his friend's face and saw sincerity there. He returned to Saul's court and resumed his service. For a brief moment there was peace between them. David played his lyre again. Saul listened again. Jonathan watched with quiet hope. But peace built on fear is fragile, and Saul's fear had not left him, only retreated for a time. Soon the shadows returned with greater weight. Saul's jealous anger rose again, and once more he hurled his spear at David. David fled into the night, escaping yet again by God's protection and Jonathan's loyalty. Jonathan met with Saul a final time in this portion of the story, speaking with the same courage and clarity as before. And once again his father listened. His anger softened, his desire to harm David eased. So Jonathan brought David back to Saul once more, and David served him faithfully, humbly, with the same pure heart that had guided him from the beginning. Their lives remained intertwined, king and shepherd, father and son's friend, ruler and servant, bound together by destiny, fear, love, and divine purpose. And though Saul's jealousy would rise again in the seasons ahead, for a moment, for now, the storm subsided and a gentle quiet settled over the palace once more. David resumed his place, Jonathan stood by his side, and Saul, though troubled, allowed peace to rest upon him, if only temporarily. As this part of David's journey settles into stillness, let your own heart sink gently into rest. Even in turmoil, God is at work. Even in danger, friendship can become a shelter. Even in uncertainty, the Lord guides every step with quiet, unwavering care. David did not yet see what lay ahead. Saul did not understand the shadows he battled. Jonathan did not know the cost of loyalty yet to come. But God knew. He always knows. And the same faithfulness that carried David through fear and favor, through shadows and light, is the same faithfulness that surrounds you tonight. So breathe softly, rest deeply, and trust that the God who guided David's steps is guiding yours even now, quietly, gently, steadily. Good night, fellow traveler.